Okay, so I figured out the pen tool problem I was having before. Um, I was doing everything right except that I was drawing in the plan view, and God only knows why Cinema 4D made it. What I wanted to do was try to snap to this axis when I got close to it, but it wasn't working. And so I'm going to hit Control Z. But if I'm in perspective view and I'm close to that axis, I just click, it works. Why doesn't it work when I'm in plan view? I'll never know. But so if you want to snap, let's see, I've got it set to 5. Yeah. For some reason, it's weird, but it does sort of work. You gotta be careful because it goes into what I've been calling Z a lot of times, but it's actually the Y axis in Cinema 4D. But you can snap to the grid and like draw if you're in the right my goodness. Cinema 4D is a little quirky. Like why? There it goes. Snaps there. Snaps there. So it can snap, but it's really finicky. And well, to tell you honestly, it's kind of annoying. But it does work, and I knew that snapping to the grid worked with quantizing, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't. Well, turns out it doesn't snap to the stinking grid in plan view, which is just crazy. Anyways, typically, by the way, if you're going to draw a profile for a skirt board around a floor, what you want to do is, I'm going to delete this here. So you just select it in the thing and hit delete button. What you want to do is you want to draw your plan view using the pen tool. You want to draw your rail. Come on, be close. Okay. Your middle mouse button, click inside that view and it switches back and forth. But I'm going to try to set this up to like, I don't know, 100 centimeters. And I don't know why it's working like that. Well, let's say you drew your rail that you want it to trace around the room. Then you can choose the object mode. You hit escape, and you don't hit enter, you hit escape to complete your pen. And then you would draw the skirtboard profile by coming to the front view and choosing your pen tool. Be careful, because now if I click on a point that's already in the existing spline, it tries to draw and continue drawing on that existing spline. So what you gotta hit it is you gotta start somewhere else. It's really annoying. So maybe gosh, it's annoying. I've run into this several times now where it won't let me start a new spline. Even if I disable it, yeah, it still goes into that same spline. Thanks, Cinema 4D. You're my hero. Gosh, I mean, let's try and make something impossible. Sometimes it works perfectly fine, and other times like this, like it just will not work. I don't understand what's going on. So there we go. And now what you can do is tell that point to go to 0 and hit enter, and it'll jump to the 0 point. And now I can come into my front view, which is where I want it to be. Quantizing is on, so at least it'll snap to up and down or left and right, and I can draw my profile, whatever I desire here. I'm going to change my steps to 1. There we go, and wow. I really hate that quantizing is so weird. Oh, you know what? That's because I want this not to be 99 centimeters. I want it to be 10 centimeters high. I'm going to hit Control A and hit S, and it's zooming into that. And now my quantizing step makes sense at 1 centimeter. Now you see it's actually snapping to the grid. Okay. So in fairness, I was doing it wrong. You just have to be sure that your quantizing steps are somewhere in the ballpark of how big your object is. So here I am, 1 centimeter. I want the skirt board to maybe, I don't know. Let's make this 0.5. There we go. And again, you want to choose close spline like that. Go back to this, and then we can run that on the rail. So this one's the rail. This one's the profile. And now you don't have to, or you shouldn't have to mess with the orientation of that axis. So I'm choosing the rail, and I'm going to hold we want sweep. So I'm holding the Alt key down and choose sweep while my rail was selected. And I drop my profile underneath the word sweep. And it should have swept it along the rail. Where is my rail? Something's happened to, what did I do? Delete my rail somehow? Oh, duh. Okay, I had it disabled because it was bothering me before. Okay, so here we go. A default perspective should be like that. So I made the mistake of drawing the rail in the wrong direction. The rail should be going like that. I want that to be 200. And then this one should be 200, and then positive 400. There we go. It should be going like that. All right, so Cinema 4D. I tell you what. There's my X positive. There's my Z positive. Z and X are positive. There's my Y going up. In the front view, I choose profile, and I'm in edit mode. I can see the profile, but if you are in object mode, you can't see your profile. So if you're looking to figure out where that profile went, when you have the sweep added to it, you won't be able to see it until you enable profile mode, or you can hit Q. I think it's Q to disable the sweep. Q is not working to say, yeah, Q, it disables the sweep, and then it'll show up. Okay, so now I know that the profile, it's flipping 180 degrees upside down. So we can try this. We can go to the rail. We can right click. And we can choose to go into edit mode on my rail. Control A. Let's try this. Oh, by the way, if you're holding Alt key and you accidentally rotate your view when you're in front or in plan view, hold the Shift key down while you're holding Alt, and you can snap to the planar coordinates. So I'm on rail and disable my profile for a second. So here's my rail. And here we can see that there's a white and then it slowly fades to blue. That is the starting point and end point. What I'm going to do is flip that. So I'm going to right click while I'm in points mode. And I've got Control A. I did Control A to select the whole thing. And I'm going to choose reverse sequence. And And hopefully that will fix my problem. Okay, so now it flipped it up, but unfortunately it's still going on the outside. So I will still have to go into the profile and choose this mode here. Choose this guy. Actually, before I do that, go into profile. Maybe if I go into edit mode on the profile, Control A, right click and choose reverse sequence. Nope, still the same problem. So that makes 0 sense to me. I guess it could make sense. I guess it could make sense because if we were to, because now we know that that end of the, well, let's move it back. Let's go to rail. Let's go to points mode, Control A, right click, reverse sequence. So now this is the beginning. It's traveling that way. But the problem is that the rail, for some reason, it's reading as if it's upside down, and there's no twist function like in Blender. In Blender, I could just twist that rail around and I could flip that up. So really this whole profile thing becomes a huge pain in the butt because it's completely unpredictable how it's going to orient itself. And to tell you honestly, I've spent a couple of hours trying to figure this out and I've not succeeded. So if anybody out there can tell me what's going on, how to get this predictable, that would be great. But so what I have to do is take my profile and go either into, I'm going to go into the front view and I'm going to hit R. I'm going to choose enable axis and I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees. And that got it direction the way I expected. And that's because the line itself is weird. Watch what happens if I put in a cube and make it editable and choose a line. If you look at the axis, look what they do to the axis. Why is the axis on a 45-degree angle for that object? It's crazy. Like if you were to go to the coordinate system, set it to world, then it would be right. But if you look at the relative coordinate, this is the object coordinate, then it's at 45-degree angle, which makes no sense at all. Thanks, Cinema 4D. You're brilliant. All right, so another building thing I wanted to show you guys in that last video, but I didn't mention because I was distracted by a couple of things. If you go into face mode while you're in an object and you choose multiple faces, they have a tool. You just right click and you choose normal move, and then it will actually move it. I'm clicking and dragging. It will move them according to their own normals. And they also have a normal extrude, I think. Actually, I might be able to. No. They have normal scale, normal rotate, normal move. So let's say we choose this face, this face, this face, and we hit T for scale, and I hold Control down, and I just click and drag. I'm going to do it. It should do an inset. That's not what I wanted. Okay, so if you hold one face and you hold Control and click and drag, it doesn't inset. But if you hold three faces, it only insets the outer face like that. And it also apparently because it's scaling in all three directions, of course it scales it down, which actually is kind of an interesting effect. So, you know, if you want to do it, I think if you do shift click on those three faces, right click, you can choose the inset. Where is it? There's the bevel, there's extrude inner. So the shortcut would be MW or the letter I. And for extrude, the shortcut is D. But I kind of quit using those because I use this technique. But so if you need to do three at once, I think it's MW or the letter I. So let's try that. The letter I. Yeah, and there it's going to inset the three. That's what I expected it to do, but it wasn't doing. And then now I can use extrude on those. And you just kind of click anywhere in the view. You don't have to. It's going to do a second extrude. But the other tool that I wanted to show you was the move normal, which I think I showed before, but it wasn't a good example. So move normal does that. Let's here we go. I don't know why it was so little. Move normal seems I'm clicking and dragging left and right, doesn't seem to be moving very much. If I click and drag up and down, it doesn't do anything. So I'm holding shift and clicking left and right does nothing. Control, click left and right doesn't work, but and then alt of course just rotates the view. Anyway, I wanted to show you that, and basically that if you have a face selected, you can right click and you can find your other options. But instead of beveling here, which of course sometimes you need to bevel an edge, if I were to select that edge and choose bevel, you know, it works like a typical bevel. As you would expect, there's your subdivisions and so on and so forth. But I think I showed before. We'll do it again here. We'll go to cube and then hit shift, and while I'm holding shift for the blue modifiers, click the bevel modifier and it slides it underneath of the cube geometry. So it's going to affect anything that's above the bevel in this order right here, that's directly above the order. So for instance, well, let's show. Obviously, it just, you know, it's very similar to Blender as far as subdivisions and all that goes. So, you know, here's your bevel. You can change how it can use an angle so that maybe it's using lower or greater angle. It's a bad example in this case because it's not a curved surface, but if you go back to the cube, you could like disable the bevel, go into face mode. Let's see, I'll drag this out and then I'll drag it down so we can get an angle. Let's hit T for scale. I'm just going to drag in my viewport with that T for scale, and it'll scale about all three axes at once. And now when we go back to the normal object mode, or how they call it, model mode, choose that bevel, and I can change the angle threshold to only affect the 90-degree. Well, okay. Oh, I have bevel disabled. Here we go. So it's only going to affect those until I drag that angle down to below the angle that it is in the model. So if I want it only to affect 90-degree angles, I can do that. And of course, anything above 90, then it doesn't affect any of them. So that's how that works. And you can, of course, stack the modifiers. So now, if I were to set this offset to, let's say, 10, set the subdivisions to 1, and turn on the lines so we can see what we're doing here. See, obviously that's not, there is a limit function here, but it doesn't work exactly like Blender. You'll see that it hits the limit for some, but it doesn't stop you from keeping going with the others. It just limits. So this, I actually like the way this bevel limit works better than the Blender limit. The blender limit, bevel limit, kind of just like stops you from beveling, and you can't bevel anymore. But here I can keep expanding, and you're noticing right in here, when it reaches the limit to it can't bevel anymore right there, it'll still let me bevel out here and out here even more. I can keep going. So that's kind of nice. So that's what the limit does. If you don't have a limit, then the bevel like goes through itself, and that doesn't look good. So anyway, let's try this. Set this back to here, and then I can set a bevel on a bevel, which I want to do. So I'm going to set the subdivisions down to 0. Put this at 6, and now I'm going to choose the bevel, hold shift down and hit bevel again. And on this bevel, use angle. Doesn't work like that. I forget how it works now. Ah, there it is. So here's our original bevel, and here's the new one. And I don't want the new one on top, I want the old one on top. So here's the new one, and set this to, set that to 1 centimeter. So now I am beveling my bevel. Set this to 1, 2, and we can change the angle that it affects. It's only gonna probably want it to set to 40. Anyway, you can see how it's changing as I change this angle. Oops, change the angle. Let's put this back here. Of course, we want to limit that one. And we can subdivide that. So you can get a interesting effect. And that's just how you stack modifiers like the way you would in Blender. And on top of this then, I can hold the Alt key down on my cube and hit subdivide right here like this, and it gives me my subdivision surface. I can disable those bevels, and you can see how they're affecting my subdivision surface. So those are stacked modifiers, but it's obviously weird because in Blender you would just see all 3 of these stacked one on top of the other, and so it's not clear which one is being initiated first, except that underneath the cube, this bevel is working first, and then it's this bevel. And if I hit Q, it'll disable the subdivision surface. So Q only disables those green modifiers. It doesn't disable these blue ones. If you want to disable them, you click on this button here. Okie dokie. Change this one to be that is crazy. All right. Talk about is instances versus groups. So if you want to instance something in an array and make an array of it, so we've got this object here. If I want to make an instance of it, I have to go to MoGraph. No. There it is, right there. It's under this thing. So I would hit Alt and I would hit Instance. No, I wouldn't. Control Z. You don't hit Alt. In this case, for instance, whoops, you just drag and you just, if you have your object selected that you want to make an instance of, you choose Instance. And now it has made an instance of the subdivision surface. We can disable that view and we see this is the instanced piece. So I'm going to move that out of the way. And I'm going to go back to this subdivision surface, go back into the bevel, and change the offset, and you can see it's changing on my instance over here. So that is how you use instances. And then you can take an array. here's my object. If I want to make a, let's say, pretend like this was, I don't know, a window, and you wanted 2 windows in the wall, you can make an instance of it and move the window over like that. But you can also make an array so that you can, I'm going to delete that instance. Click on this. I'm going to, in this array right here, they don't have a linear array. They only have a radial array, which is interesting because Blender, it's very difficult to make a radial array in Blender. Basic vanilla Blender anyway. But in here, what you want is you want to go to MoGraph and you choose Cloner. And again, I think you have to hit Alt key for Cloner, and you Alt key, and now it's got this Cloner tag. And this Cloner allows you to make a linear, a radial, or even a grid array, which they don't have in Blender. So you can make your grid array, and then you can give your count and you give your distance. So let's go to 10 meters. Set each of these to, let's set this to 15 meters. And set this to 5 meters. Okay. So there you go, there's your array. If you set this to 0, I presume that you won't have that. But it won't let you set it to 0, it lets you set it to 1. So you could use this for the grid array, you could use for linear array as well. But linear array, you could set it to 3, but now instead of setting it offsetting on the Y, so that just moves the object, but this would move the offset of the array. But you could also delete that, set that to 0, and set this to 500, and it'll go in the Z direction. 0, set this to 500, go in that direction. So apparently we can change the scaling of those instances. So yeah, this is interesting. So you can see that it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, so it went in the negative now, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's interesting. So it looks like you can change the pitch. I'm using my scroll wheel to change that, but we can hold Shift key down, and that changes the pitch of the rotation. So feel free to play with that. You can see that's interesting. And that's how you array objects, and that's how you use instances. A group, however, I think I already showed you group once before, but we could group. Here's the sweep that we made before. Here it is right there, and we could group that with this cloner. So we can take the cloner. Oh, if you middle mouse click on this top object, everything that's inside of it, so here the profile and the rail will be selected. So I middle click on the sweep and it'll select everything inside. So if I middle click here and then I hit Control and I hit middle click on that guy, I've got everything. Oh, middle click and Shift. Oh, I'm sorry. Middle click, Shift, Control, all 3 together. Click on it to select it, and then looks like I have the room turned off. We could even group the room. So middle Shift, Control, middle click to select everything there, and then I can Alt G. And then I'll put them all inside of a group, and I can call that, whatever. So here's my new group. And that's how groups work. They don't really have, I forget what they call them in Blender all of a sudden, those little folders that they have. But I believe you know what I mean. They don't really have that exactly. They have these null objects, and you just group them like that. And then you can use either a cloner or you can use a instance. I'm sure I could instance even that group. So I'm going to group instance, and now I can move that group instance. Okay, so that works on groups and instances. Hope that helps. We will talk to you later.